What does it feel like to vanish from your own life? To stand in a room you've lived in for years and not recognize the memories hanging on the walls? To hear someone call your name like they've always known you, while you're left wondering who they really are? This is not a riddle or a poetic metaphor. This was my reality. And I believed it was the end. My name is Clara, and I was erased. It began slowly, like fog slipping under a doorframe. At first, it was just little things, forgotten conversations, misplaced items. I swore I never moved. I blamed stress. I blamed myself. But nothing could explain what was coming next. The day my reflection no longer looked back at me the way it used to. I remember that morning too vividly. The light through the blinds looked colder, harsher. My phone buzzed with messages from people I didn't recognize, people who insisted we'd spoken just days ago. But I had no memory of them. Then I checked my email. My inbox was empty. Every single thread wiped clean. All my saved photos in the cloud?
Gone.
My online presence gone. My passwords didn't work. I wasn't hacked. I was being removed. A neighbor I'd known for years walked past me without a glance. When I stopped her and asked if she was okay, she smiled awkwardly and said, "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I laughed at first. I thought it was a joke. But she wasn't joking. It wasn't just my memory unraveling. It was the world forgetting me, one thread at a time. I tried calling my sister, Maya. We hadn't been close for a while, but I needed anyone. She picked up, her voice familiar. But when I said, "Maya, it's me," she paused. "I think you have the wrong number." I sat on the floor of my kitchen that night, knees to chest, staring at the same fridge I had decorated with notes, bills, and Polaroids. Except now it was bare. Not even a single magnet remained. What do you do when your own life becomes a ghost story? I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't sick. But the world around me insisted otherwise. And slowly, terrifyingly, a question started echoing in my mind. Was I ever real, to begin with? It's strange how quiet everything gets when you think your life is ending. Not a dramatic kind of ending, no car crash, no final breath. Just silence. Isolation. Being unseen in a place where you once belonged. That's what I thought it was, the end. A quiet vanishing. A soft deletion of everything I ever loved, everything I ever was. But then, something shifted. A letter arrived in the mailbox. No return address. My name was written in looping cursive, Clara Rose Bennett. The envelope smelled faintly of lavender. Inside, one sentence. Not everything that is erased disappears. No explanation. No signature. Just those 8 words that sparked something inside me I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. And maybe a chance to begin again. Clara Rose Bennett wasn't the kind of woman people forgot easily. At least, not before the erasure began. She had the kind of presence that lingered. The way she tilted her head when listening. The soft lilt in her voice when she read poetry out loud. The habit of humming to herself while waiting for the kettle to boil. Clara was warmth wrapped in quiet strength. Not loud, not overbearing, but deeply felt. Her life wasn't perfect, but it had been meaningful. She had worked as a children's book illustrator, breathing magic into stories with color and imagination. Her small studio apartment in the city was filled with sketchbooks, half-finished drawings, and shelves of fairy tales, some worn at the edges from years of use. She loved her work, even if it didn't make her rich. Creating beauty in a messy world felt like resistance. It made her feel whole. Clara had a sister, Maya, 2 years younger. Their bond used to be strong. But time, and maybe a few too many unspoken resentments, had stretched their closeness thin. Still, Clara never stopped caring. She always remembered Maya's birthday, always sent her notes in the mail, even when Maya didn't reply. Then there was Theo. Theo was the kind of man who walked like he knew where he was going. He and Clara met at a local bookstore, both reaching for the same edition of Wuthering Heights. Their romance was quiet and slow, long walks, shared silence, old music, and whispered dreams. Clara trusted him in a way she hadn't trusted anyone before. With him, She felt safe.
Seen.
Understood. Until he vanished. No goodbye. No warning. One night, he held her like he always did. By morning, he was gone, clothes missing, phone disconnected. As if he had never existed at all. She reported it. Filed a missing persons report. But the police found no records of him. No ID. No employment history. Nothing. Even his photos with Clara began to disappear from her phone. The erasure began there. She just didn't realize it at the time. Before all of this, Clara had been grounded. In routine. In small joys. She loved mornings with chamomile tea. She had a favorite bench in the park where she'd sit and sketch the world as it moved. She believed in subtle forms of beauty. In letters written by hand. In moments that didn't need to be captured to matter. She had a therapist once, Dr. Lindstrom, who always told her, "You're not broken, Clara. You're just unprotected in a world that never learned how to be gentle." That line stuck with her. But even Clara's gentleness had its limits. Beneath her soft demeanor was a history of surviving what others couldn't see. A mother who left when she was 10. A father who smiled in public but disappeared into his own head at home. A lifetime of trying to be enough while constantly feeling invisible. She carried that invisibility like an old coat, heavy, worn, familiar. There were friends, too. Or rather, people who called themselves her friends. Amelia, her college roommate, who always seemed to love Clara more when Clara was falling apart. And Julian, her neighbor upstairs, who offered help with groceries, but once tried to read her journal when he thought she wasn't looking. Clara didn't trust easily. And now, as the world around her began to forget her, she trusted no one. Except for the man in the gray coat. She saw him twice. Once at the bus stop near her street. Another time across from the library. He never spoke. Just looked at her, as if trying to remember something too. He had sharp eyes, a scar across his eyebrow, and a worn leather satchel that he never opened. She wasn't sure if he was real. Or if she had created him, a remnant of the mind trying to make sense of the impossible. Still, something about his presence felt important. Like a thread, waiting to be pulled. More than anything, Clara's story is about memory. The kind that lives in silence. The kind that survives even when the world forgets. The kind that says, "You are here. You mattered." And no one can take that away. Even if they tried. The day Clara saw her name scratched off a city registry was the day she stopped pretending things were normal. She had gone to renew her ID, trying to cling to some thread of routine. But when she handed her papers to the woman behind the desk, the woman frowned. "I'm sorry. There's no record of a Clara Rose Bennett in our system." Clara blinked. "That's impossible. I've lived in this city for 6 years." The woman checked again, then leaned back in her chair with an apologetic shrug. "Are you sure you've never changed your name legally?" "I haven't," Clara whispered. "Then you might want to contact the Department of Vital Records." But even that door led nowhere. Every government system, every digital record, every saved backup gone.
She didn't exist.
She walked home that day feeling like a ghost. The world was bustling, people talking, cars honking, birds flying. But none of it included her. Her presence was being unthreaded from reality. And then the dreams started. They weren't nightmares. Not exactly. But they left her waking with her heart pounding and her bedsheets tangled around her. Always the same scene. She stood at the edge of a forest, dark and endless, and someone, always the same man in the gray coat, called out her name from deep within. Except in the dream, he called her something else. Clara May. That wasn't her name.
Was it?
Clara began to search for anything, a diary entry, an old yearbook, anything to prove who she was. But every trace of her life had been tampered with. Her old journals were missing pages. Her emails were wiped clean. Even the books she had illustrated bore someone else's name on the back cover. It was as if the world was trying to convince her that she had never lived at all. One night, desperate, she broke into her old college's archive room, the place where she had left her senior art portfolio. She remembered it clearly, a collection of hand-drawn illustrations inspired by forgotten fairy tales. She found the drawer, opened the file, but the folder inside had a different name on it. Clarice Monroe. And the drawings were hers. Every line, every shade, she knew them by heart. But the name? It wasn't hers. Or was it? That night, Clara stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. Her face looked familiar. But something about her eyes, the tiredness, the weight, seemed like it belonged to someone else. And then the doorbell rang. She froze. It was past midnight. No one ever came to her door at that hour. She crept to the peephole. The man in the gray coat stood there, motionless. Before she could react, he slid a folded piece of paper under the door and walked away without a word. Her hands shook as she opened it. "You're not losing your mind. You're remembering." No signature. No explanation. But that message lit something in her soul. She wasn't going crazy. She wasn't broken. She was waking up. Over the next few days, Clara pieced together clues. She searched her dreams for meaning. She drew every scene she could remember. The forest, the man, the voice. She even drew the name Clara May over and over in different styles, different scripts, like trying on a coat that both fit and didn't. She returned to her childhood home, a small, creaking cottage outside the city that had been empty since her father's passing. Inside, everything was covered in dust. But one box remained untouched in the attic. Inside it, old photos, drawings, letters addressed to Clara May Bennett, not Clara Rose. She dropped the box. Her knees buckled. So she had been Clara May once. Her name had been changed. But by who?
And why?
Suddenly it all clicked. The dreams, the vanishing, the strange gaps in her life, the reappearing man. This wasn't coincidence. She had been erased. But by whom? A storm rolled in that evening, thunder rattling the windows of the house. Clara sat by the fire with the box open beside her, flipping through evidence of a life she didn't remember choosing to forget. One letter, yellowed at the corners, stood out. It was addressed to Clara May, in case you ever remember. She opened it carefully. If you're reading this, they failed to keep it buried. Your mind is stronger than they thought. You weren't just erased for who you were, Clara. You were erased for what you knew, for what you witnessed, for what you created. The rest of the letter had been torn, but Clara clutched it to her chest like a lifeline. She didn't just have to remember. She had to fight to reclaim it all. The next morning, Clara rose before the sun. Something had shifted inside her. She was done being afraid. She was done being erased. Armed with the box of letters and drawings, she returned to the city. This time, she wasn't looking for answers. She was demanding them. She started by visiting the publishing house where she had once submitted her illustrated children's book series. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled vaguely when Clara walked in. "Can I help you?" Clara placed one of the drawings on the counter, an unmistakable sketch of a little girl riding a fox across a moonlit field. The woman blinked. "That's from the Wanderlight series," she said slowly. "But you must be mistaken. The illustrator's name is Clarice Monroe." Clara leaned in. "I am Clarice Monroe. That was my name before I was erased." The woman stiffened. "Excuse me? I created this. I created all of it." She took out more drawings, laying them out like cards on a table, each one more vibrant, more intimate, impossible to forge. Her fingerprints were on every page. Her style, her rhythm, her soul poured into every line. The woman hesitated, staring at the drawings. I remember someone coming in years ago with a portfolio just like this," she whispered. "But her name wasn't Clarice. I remember her face, though." Clara nodded. "That was me. Before it all changed." She didn't push further. She had planted a seed of doubt. That was enough. Her next stop was the old university library, the same archive room where her drawings had been misattributed. This time, she demanded the original submission logs, the handwritten entries students used before everything became digital. And there it was. Line number 423, written in blue ink. Clara May Bennett, Senior Portfolio Submission. Right below it, in pencil, Someone had scribbled. Name corrected to Clarice Monroe, C note. But there was no note. No initials. No explanation. Just a quiet revision of her identity. Clara stared at the paper for a long time, her hands trembling. Someone or something had been changing her history in plain sight. She took a photo, documented everything. She needed evidence now, not just memories. That night, she returned to her apartment. A note was taped to her door. Meet me
Tomorrow.
3 p.m. The place in your dreams. No name. No address. But Clara didn't hesitate. She knew exactly where to go. The forest. It wasn't just a dream. It was a real place, hidden behind the city's edge, past the old train tracks, where the woods thickened into silence. Clara arrived 10 minutes early. The sky above the trees was slate gray, and the air smelled of pine and mystery. She waited. Then, just as the clock struck 3, he appeared. The man in the gray coat. Up close, he looked older than she expected. Deep lines carved around his eyes. His hair peppered with silver. But his eyes held the kind of knowing that only came from loss. Clara May, he said softly. She didn't flinch this time. That's really my name, isn't it? He nodded. The name you were born with. Before they took it from you. She stepped closer. Who are they? He exhaled, reaching into his coat and pulling out a thick, leather-bound book. It looked ancient, the edges worn, the spine faded. On the cover, the erasure protocol. He opened it, revealing pages filled with handwritten notes, symbols, and black and white photographs.
There's a system, he said.
A hidden institution. They call themselves the Preservers. They exist to protect a certain version of the world, one that suits their interests. Clara stared at him. They remove threats, he continued. People who create things too powerful to control. People like you. She scoffed. I was just an illustrator. No, he said firmly. You were more than that. Your stories, the ones you drew as a child, contained symbols that were older than language. Things you didn't even realize you were channeling. Clara's mind reeled. What are you saying? You were born with a memory that wasn't entirely your own, he explained.
A gift.
Or a curse, depending on who you ask. Your dreams, your drawings, they weren't just imagination. They were echoes of something ancient, and the Preservers feared what would happen if you remembered. She took a step back, her breath shallow. So, they wiped me? They tried, he said. But you're stronger than most. The erasure failed.
Your soul began to fight back.
That's why the dreams returned. That's why you're here now. Clara clutched the old letter in her coat pocket. Then why didn't you come sooner? I wasn't allowed to, he said with regret. But when you reached back, when you opened that box, when you remembered, you broke the boundary. What now? She whispered. You have a choice, he said. You can live a quiet life. Fade into the world again. Or you can reclaim what was stolen and expose them. Clara's hands tightened into fists. I want the truth. He handed her the leather book. Then follow the threads, he said. It won't be easy. They'll come for you again. But this time, you'll know who you are. The wind picked up, rustling the trees. And Clara turned, not away, but toward the forest. Toward the path of remembering. Weeks passed. And Clara didn't stop. She used the book to trace others like her. People who had been erased, altered, silenced. She started a digital archive, one that couldn't be deleted. She exposed names, dates, operations. And though the world didn't immediately believe her, the cracks in the system began to show. Others came forward. Whistleblowers. Forgotten artists.
Silent scientists.
She was no longer alone. In the final pages of her journal, Clara wrote, I thought I was losing everything. But in truth, I was being given a second chance. Not to become someone new, but to become who I was all along. The world hadn't forgotten Clara. It had never truly known her.
But now?
Now it would. Sometimes, the most powerful journey we can take isn't to a place, but back to ourselves. Clara's story isn't just about being erased. It's about rising again. When the world tried to silence her, when her memories blurred and her identity was stolen, she chose to reclaim her truth. She chose to fight, not with violence, but with clarity, with courage, with a refusal to disappear. You may never face the same kind of darkness Clara did, but perhaps you felt lost, forgotten. Maybe there's a part of you the world didn't understand, or didn't want to. And maybe, just maybe, you've been wondering, what if who I used to be was never who I truly was? We all carry pieces of ourselves that were left behind by fear, by pain, by people who didn't see our worth. But those pieces aren't gone. They're waiting for you to stop shrinking, to stop doubting, and to finally say, I remember who I am. The truth is, you are not the names they gave you. You are not the stories they wrote about you. You are the light that refused to dim, even in the deepest night. So ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped hiding? What if you trusted your voice, your instincts, your dreams, even the ones that don't make sense yet? What if everything you've been through wasn't the end, but the beginning of your awakening? Clara thought it was the end, but remembering changed everything. So now it's your turn.
Pick up the pen.
Open the door and walk bravely, wildly, fully, back into your own story. The world may try to erase you, but as long as you remember, you'll never truly disappear.